To make accessing the cover for the engine easier, I'm going to take this seat out. It's very easy. 4 18mm bolts. Some of them will have a little cover like this, which we'll have to remove in a second, and some won't, such as this one at the front here. You can see the nut will be exposed down there, so let's go ahead and unthread it. There's one on each corner, so we'll just go around and remove them all. Nut number 2. On the back side, let's pull these caps off, and that'll expose the 2 rear nuts. Last one. Now I'm just going to lift the seat up, pull it out of here, tilt it back. There's wiring attached, but I'm not going to disconnect it. I'm just going to leave it as is. I went ahead and did the same thing to the passenger side so I can have both areas clear to pull the doghouse off. And on both sides, on the driver's side it's next to the gas pedal, on the other side it's, well, the opposite. On the other side it's, well, in the same area, just on the other side. Lift this flap up, and that's going to unlock the latch for the doghouse. The next thing I want to do is remove this knee panel. It's held on by 2 10mm bolts, one over here, and the rest is just push clips. So once those are out, we'll pop it off. Pull straight out. Take down the kick panel here, the knee panel, 2 10mm bolts. There's one. There's the second one. And at this point you can just pull it straight out on it. At this point, grab it from the side, pull straight out. Okay. Underneath the center console / cup holder, there are 2 more clips that we have to undo. I have a panel here that's missing. It's like a little pocket. Either way, open that up, and there's going to be 2 10mm bolts right behind it. Remove both. There are 2 more up top. Now this entire unit can be removed, and it will expose these 2 clips. This one's already loose. That's nice. So is this one. Now you can lift this up, pull it out. Pull straight back as you lift up, and there you go. You have access to the backside of your engine. To make things easier, I'm just going to remove this air intake and filter box. 2 10mm bolts at the front. The mass airflow sensor connector right here. Remove that. And then with an 8mm socket, you can remove this clamp that holds on the intake, or the intake duct, to the air filter housing. Just unthread this a little bit until the clamp loosens up. There we go. Now we can pull this right out. Set that aside. Another one of these clamps over here by the throttle body. Again, also 8mm. Just give it a few turns until it loosens up, and then we can pull this duct right out of here. Okay, maybe a little more. Okay, set that aside. Let's take this off of here. 8mm socket, remove this bolt. There's the bolt. Pull this straight up and out. There's an 8mm bolt right here that's kind of covered by the wiring here, but this holds the
two cables in place onto the intake, and you have to remove this to free up the cables for the throttle body, so you can remove or pull away the throttle body. Let's pop this harness out of here. Maybe this will give us a little bit of extra room. There we go. Open up the connector. Okay, so here's one bolt that frees up the front of this bracket. From the inside, two more 8mm bolts, the same, that hold this bracket down onto the intake. Go ahead and remove those. Okay, there it is. And there's a third one at the top here. There's a third one. Now back outside, let's unplug the throttle body connections. There's one at the top here, and there's one at the bottom as well. Set those aside. And then we have 3 nuts, one at the top and 2 at the bottom. They kind of form a triangle. Deep 10mm socket. Break those free. Just make sure you don't lose it. There it is. There we go. Finally broke free. We'll switch to a smaller ratchet now. No, this whole stud is coming out in this one. That's fine. Okay. Pull the throttle body away from the intake. And what this does is it prevents us from disconnecting any coolant hoses. And now the intake is separated from here. We'll go ahead and unplug this while we're at it, because this harness goes back onto the intake. So this can stay here, harness can stay back there. And while we're here, let's disconnect this 10mm nut that holds the plastic bracket for this harness down on the intake. That has to come off. Okay. I'm actually going to take this stud right out with an inverted Torx. It's an E5 socket. It'll make removal of this quite a bit easier. If you don't have this, you might be able to grab it with some pliers because it shouldn't be very tight. Obviously don't grab it on the threads, just grab it on the top there. Some needle nose locking pliers might do the trick, or even a very small regular hex socket might do the job. Either way, now once we unbolt this from the inside, you can hopefully just slide it around as opposed to pulling it up and over the stud. Let's unbolt these two 10mm bolts. Unplug the map sensor. Go back on the connector, set it to the side. Let's unplug this connector too. Then from the back side, I pushed on this and unsecured it from the intake. We'll set this aside as well. I'm going to cut these wire ties. That'll free up this plastic cover from the harness. There are multiple around the whole harness here, so just go around and cut those all, remove them. Now with this freed up, I'm going to go ahead and push this out of the way, as well as the cables for the throttle body. Now our harness is quite a bit more free, and we can pull it to the side here, and we can move it around as needed when we free up the intake. At this point, disconnect the Pcv hose. I'm going to open up this retainer here for the harness to pull the harness out of it. There we go. Once the injectors get unplugged, which I guess we can do now, then this harness will be able to move more out of the way. So let's unplug the injectors. You're going to have to pull up or press on the little tab. I'll show you that in a minute. and that unlocks this lock here. Once you pull the lock out, press on that same tab and pull up on the harness, and that should unplug the injector wiring from the injector. There we go. So basically, I can show you out in the open now. This is what it's going to look like when it's connected. You want to press on this tab and pull the lock out, and then press on this tab again. You might have to help this along with a pocket screwdriver from underneath to spread out from the connector, then pull it up and it'll unlock. Let's do the same to the rest of the injectors. That's 7 more. Next, let's unplug this hose here. Set it aside. Let's unhook the fuel rail. Take out this safety clip here. Set that to the side. Remove any debris that might be in the area, just because you don't want it to get into the fuel rail. Now you put this adapter in here, and what this is going to do, once you press it, watch out because fuel might come out. Press this into the line, and that will release the line from this line. There we go. Like I said, fuel will come out. And now you do the same to this lower one. Take this out. Slide the tool over. Press it in. Sometimes you have to wiggle it around and remove the line. Let's press on this tab to unlock this line. Pull this line off. This is going to have to get moved a little bit to the side so that the intake can come off. This is what the line is connected to on the other side. You can either disconnect the line and remove the line, or might as well take the whole thing out, the line with this. Slide it right out of the way. We'll fish it back through later. Take this bolt out, 15mm socket. Taking this out will just allow the fuel rail to move around a little bit more while it's still attached to the intake. Just pull this straight out. I'm going to put the bolt back so I don't lose it, but now we have a little bit more room to work with here when the fuel rail comes off with the intake. 8mm bolts all around this intake that hold it down. I'm just going to go and break them free, and then I'll remove it. It's best to start from the outside and work your way in, but because we have a limited amount of space here, I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to go little by little until I break them all free, and then I'll just remove them all. One side. Now the intake is free. All we have to do is pull it up and remove it. Looks like it's hanging up on one of the bolts back here. There we go. Is there another bolt? Nope. Okay. this wiring comes off of the intake. Pcv hose on this side is kind of getting jammed in here. So we'll pull it up and over. Leave it right there. Okay. Try to get as little debris inside the engine as possible. And just make sure none of the wires are getting caught. Oops. Okay. Try to pull this hose off here. I know it's hard to see, but okay, pop that hose off. Now grab the rest of the intake, wiggle it out of place, and there it is. So I want to vacuum all this up. There's a lot of debris here, and preferably you want to vacuum it before too, which I already did, but that was as much as I could get out with the vacuum cleaner. So I'm just gonna have to do a very good cleaning now. Now pop this cover up with a little pry bar, screwdriver, whatever you have here. Okay, now you can see the wiring, and on the side of it, this might be a little bit difficult to do, and actually I might need some pliers, but basically you have to squeeze the sides in and pull it up. Can't really fit my fingers in there, so let me get some pliers. So now with some needle nose pliers, I'm gonna hopefully grab onto the sides of the connector for the knock sensor, squeeze it, yep, and pull it out. So basically, this is what has to happen. It has two tabs here, and when you squeeze it, those spread out and let go. And we'll have to do the same to this rear one over here, or front, I guess. That's the front of the engine. There we go, pop it up. Same deal. Okay. Set that harness aside. Take the harness and connect it onto the knock sensors. Just drop it down till it clicks and ensure that it is properly connected. You don't want this to pop off. Now take these covers and slide them down in here. Sometimes you might need a little rubber mallet to just persuade them into place. Make sure you don't tap the wire though. Okay, do the same to the front one. I cleaned up the area, by the way, just a little bit. That way I make sure that it gets a nice watertight seal. That's what these covers are for. You don't want any debris getting in there. Perfect. At this point, we are ready to put the intake back on, but obviously you can't go back like this. We have to clean everything and make it nice and level. You don't want debris in the way of the gasket sealing. So I'm going to take a razor blade and just scrape everything away. I'm going to use a vacuum cleaner to make sure that stuff doesn't go down into the ports. You can cover them up with rags if you want, or you can just follow along your razor blade with a vacuum and suck the debris out as you are scraping it. So basically, just scrape away from the ports, remove your debris, and we'll make sure we have a nice clean surface for the intake gaskets to mount on. Okay, everything is cleaned up now. Cleaned up with the razor blade. I have this rag that's soaked in brake parts cleaner. I'm going to use this to degrease the surface and remove the remaining debris that's in here, whether it's gunk, sand, whatever it might be. You just want a nice clean surface for the gasket to sit on. You don't want any sort of air leaks here at the intake. That would be bad. So just go along the whole surface and clean it up. Just like this. We'll do this on both sides, of course. And then we will install the intake. If you haven't covered your intake ports, it's a good idea to use a vacuum or a blowgun and just try to get out anything that may have potentially fallen in there. So I'm going to do that after we wipe it down. I know they're clean. I know mine are clean because I used a vacuum while I cleaned it all up, but I'll double check it. Couldn't hurt. Here's the intake. I'm going to pop the gaskets off the side of it. has a little tab that locks them in. And just slide them down. Another tab right here. And of course we have to clean the surface. Can't leave it like this. So take a rag. Actually this one's extra gunky, so what I'm going to do, be careful of the injectors, but you can take a razor blade and scrape all the junk off, and then we'll make sure we vacuum in there to get everything cleaned up properly. There's a lot of debris here, and you being plastic, you don't want to use anything abrasive like a wire wheel or a sanding disc or anything like that. You will completely destroy the intake. So you want to do it manually, do it slowly, and just take your time. Make sure that it is completely clean and flat, and of course at the end I will degrease it with some brake parts cleaner. Basically the same way that we cleaned the intake is the same way we're going to clean this. Alright, everything is nice and clean. I degreased everything. I mostly just used brake parts cleaner and a rag and just scrubbed at it. Eventually it'll all come off and you'll be left with nice clean plastic. Now take the appropriate intake gasket. You don't want to accidentally put it on the wrong side, and just clip it in. It has 3 clips, one on each side and one in the middle. That's how it stays on, which is convenient for when you go to install the intake because it won't fall off. At this point we'll do the same to the other side of the intake, and then we'll put it in the car. So for me, these foam pieces fell out that sit at the front and at the back of the intake. They kind of just shove themselves into place there. So go ahead and put those back if yours fell. And now we can get ready to install the intake. Make sure the knock sensor wires are out of the way, but also obviously not along the heads where the intake gaskets are going to sit. Push the wiring aside, and let's slowly slide this in. Make sure all of the wiring that needs to be out of the way is out of the way. Okay, so before I fully install this, there was that vacuum hose at the front. I don't even know where it went. Here it is. We should go ahead and install this, reconnect it before it's too late. Okay, that's on. Now we'll just continue pushing this into place, but obviously make sure that, again, you're not pinching anything, hoses, wires, especially gaskets. You don't want those to fall off and get ruined. And feels like it's sitting in place but also kind of hovering on something. So let's push it in a little bit more. It's almost there. Make sure you get this wiring out of the way. This goes over here. Fuel lines are in position. Everything is clear. Why won't it go more that way? Okay, that seems to have done the trick. There we go. I'm going to start in this bolt. Yep, lined up on this side. Let's try this one over here. I can kind of see that it's lined up. Just give it a little push. Yep, that dropped right in. Okay, so they're all falling into place. That means that it is lined up. So at this point, we'll just go ahead and bottom them out. Then we'll go through the torque sequence and torque these all down. At this point, I'm going to connect the fuel lines with all these bolts started because I know it's set, and this will allow the fuel smell to stop being here, I guess. Make sure you secure the lines with the little tabs that lock it on. Just like that. Perfect. Now we can go ahead and torque the intake down. You have 2 passes in the same sequence. The sequence is from the center, working your way out, just go across. I'm going to start on this side, go across on that side, and across on this side, and so on. And on the first pass, you want to go to 44 inch-pounds, not foot-pounds, inch-pounds, and then on the second pass, which is your final pass, it's going to be 89 inch-pounds. So I'm going to start over here at 44 foot-pounds, and I'm just going to torque this one down, and then I'll move across, straight across, to the other side, and so on. All right, let's move across. Okay, second pass, 89 inch-pounds, same sequence from the center, working your way out. And this time it should go a little bit faster. All All right, so those are all torqued. At this point, I know this was the final sequence, but I'm actually going to go around in a circle one more time and ensure that they are all at 89 inch-pounds. Sometimes, especially when you have rubber grommets like this here, you will tighten some of them down and the rubber squishes and it actually loosens up the first few that you tightened. So I'm just going to go around in a circle. You don't have to follow the sequence once they're all tight. And there might not be any that are loose, but you're better off checking now as opposed to finding out the hard way later. Connect your map sensor. Now let's connect the knock sensors back to their harness here. Clip the harness onto the intake, just like that, and then click the connector in. Make sure it clicks so that it's properly secured. Let's connect the injectors. Slide the wire down and make sure it clicks. Okay, pull on it to make sure it doesn't come back out, and then of course don't forget to put in this locking tab so that it doesn't get potentially well, unlocked. Now do the same to the rest of the other ones. Let's get this bracket back in. Get the PCV hose out of the way. Make sure this is nice and tight. There we go. And then while we're here, let's go ahead and reconnect this PCV hose. Okay, and of course we have this line over here that we need to bring the hose back through the front. We pulled it out that way, so let's bring it back in. Put this underneath the fuel lines and connect it. Make sure it clicks. How do you, oh, there we go. Make sure the lock is in the unlock position. Press it down, and to lock it in, just press on that white tab. Give it a little pull to make sure it's locked in, and it is. Take this little cover that covers the wiring harness, pull it back into its location, and let's put in the 2 bolts that held this down. Snug these up. All right, don't forget about this hose over here. At this point, I want to get the throttle body back in. Line it up. If you have a new gasket, I highly recommend using a new gasket here. Go ahead and plug it in so the wires don't keep dangling in my way, and then had a mounting nut up top and 2 on the bottom, 1 on each side, that is, kind of like a triangle. And for me, the stud on the bottom here actually came out with a nut. I removed the nut from the stud, and you can use an E5, that's an inverted torque, so an E5 socket, and put your socket on there and then just thread the stud in. That's what I recommend doing if yours comes out as well. Go ahead and snug up the stud a little bit, don't go too far, they break easily. Now you can put back the mounting nut down here, and then we'll snug them all up and of course torque them. Let's snug these up and then we'll torque them to 89 inch-pounds. The torque for these is 89 inch-pounds, but it's going to be difficult to get a torque wrench in here. 89 inch-pounds is not a lot. It's basically, once you bottom it out, you go maybe about 1/4 of a turn. You just make it nice and snug. That should be plenty tight. They're very small bolts, very small nuts, so don't worry about making it too tight. Let's put the bolt in for the bracket that holds on the throttle cables. Before I tighten this one fully, I'm actually going to go ahead and put the other 2 in. That way I make sure that the bracket is properly adjusted, or properly lined up, I should say. Otherwise I'd have to come back and loosen this one up. So let's do that. I got this one threaded in. Let's bring it down a little more. and snug. Since 2 of the 3 are in, third one automatically lines up. Thread in the third one, and then we'll snug the other 2 up. This one's bottomed out. There we go. All right, nice and snug. This little valve solenoid thing, let's put it back. It has a fitting right there that needs to slide down into the intake and make a nice tight seal. So go ahead and slide it in until you can feel it click in, just like that. I'm going to go ahead and connect it while I'm at it. There we go. Make sure the connector clicks. Has this little bolt at the back that has to slide in and of course be threaded on, and just make sure it's nice and snug. There we go, that's nice and snug. This still moves around just a tiny bit, that's normal. Let's put this stud back for the plastic cover. Snug up the stud. You don't have to make it too tight, just bottom it out, give it a tiny bit extra. The nut being tightened will do the rest of the tightening on the whole thing, the stud and the nut. Okay, that's bottomed out. Okay, go ahead and put the 10mm nut back on, and let's snug it up. Perfect. Put the tubing back for the throttle body. It has an arrow in case you don't remember which way it goes. It'll tell you this is the throttle body side. So slide it over, make sure it's pressed on tight, and then we'll go ahead and snug up the clamp. So once this is lined up, you know it's lined up when this little cutout sits right next to this ridge here. Then with your 8mm socket, you can snug up the clamp, and just make sure that you don't over tighten it because the screw does strip out the clamp when you over tighten it. So just make it nice and snug and just stop there. This should be perfectly secured that way. We'll put on the rest of the intake, slide this in, make sure it goes into this air duct here. Perfect. All right. We'll snug up the clamp while we're at it. Same thing, don't over tighten it. Just make it nice and snug. That'll seal up just fine. Just like that. And then there were 2 10mm bolts at the front here, but also some rubber bushings right down there that you have to press down. There we go. Put your 2 bolts in. And again, 10mm socket. Snug them both up. And if you removed your overflow tank, go ahead and put this back in. And if you didn't, don't worry about it. One last thing, don't forget to connect your mass airflow sensor. Let's put the cover back on for the engine. It should just slide right in, but of course be careful of any wires that are hanging down. I'm not sure if these were supposed to be tied up here or if someone has added these, but if you have them, make sure they're out of the way. And if you don't, well, don't worry about it. So just slide it. Make sure that this rubber seal here doesn't pop off. It can easily fall and then it doesn't make a seal. You get water, potentially exhaust fumes in here. It's not good. So slide it in all the way and make sure that it lines up with its points where it clips in. Looks like I have to shift it to the driver's side a little bit. There we go. All right, that just fell into position. Let's latch it on. Just like that. We'll do the same on the bottom here. And of course, the same on the driver's side. Don't forget about this air vent that goes in here. Just slide it in. It has these little pins that kind of help it stay in place. Let's put the cup holder back. It's got 4 10mm bolts. Line it up. And we'll go ahead and start these in. There are 2 on the bottom and a little bit harder to see, but there are 2 on the top here. Let's see if I can start them in like this. Okay, snug them up. Typically you'd have another pocket or compartment that latches in here. Mine is completely broken off and I don't have it, but obviously if you have yours, go ahead and put it back. Let's put this knee panel on the passenger side. It's got clips along the top that need to slide into these slots here. Okay, and then two 10mm bolts on the bottom. That's one. That's two. Same on the driver's side, clips all along the top. And two 10mm bolts that hold it on the bottom. Somewhere. Here they are. All right, let's put the seats back. Let's bring the seats back and line them up with their corresponding mounting studs. Oops, make sure you don't pinch any wiring. And drop it down. Let's put the nuts on. There's one on each corner. Let's bottom them out, make sure they're nice and tight. All right. Okay, last one out of the four. Again, there's one on each corner. Make sure they are all nice and tight. All right, let's do the same to the passenger side if you took both seats out. And don't forget about these little covers. Put those back to hide the bolts, or the studs. Last bolt on the passenger side. Again, four on each corner. Make sure they are nice and tight. Okay, this one unfortunately didn't have any little caps for me, but at this point, you can go ahead and turn on the engine, take it for a road test.